This is the story of Western Airlines Flight 2605. On the 31st of October 1979, a McDonnell Douglas DC-10 was on its way from Los Angeles International Airport to Mexico City International Airport in Mexico City. The plane had 89 people on board, including 13 crew members. The plane departed Los Angeles at 1:40 a.m. local time. The flight there posed no issues for the crew whatsoever, a normal early morning flight. As they closed in on Mexico City, Mexico Control cleared them into their airspace, and after that, they handed them off to the tower controller. The controller briefed the crew about the airport and the weather. It was quite foggy, and the crew would have to bring the plane in for a landing with very little visibility. The weather was not getting better. The report at 5 a.m. put the visibility at 2 to 3 nautical miles. But by 6 a.m., the visibility was effectively zero. The controller informed the crew that they'd be landing on runway 23 right. That was the active runway at the time. The plane lined up for their approach onto runway 23 right. As the plane was on final, the controller comes on and informed the crew that they were a little bit left of the center line. The pilots acknowledged, and they continued on. With fog enveloping the airport, the controller checks in with the crew to see if they could see the runway, but the crew tells him no. They could not see the runway lights through the thick fog. As they got closer and closer to the runway, the crew realized something that they should have realized a long time ago. They were heading right for runway 23 left and not 23 right. The wheels touched down on the runway and they pushed the throttles up as far as they went in an attempt to go around. They pitched the nose up by about 10 to 11 degrees. Their effort seemed to be working. The huge plane slowly started to climb out, but that's when their luck ran out. Runway 23 left had been closed for renovation, and so a lot of machinery was on the runway. The right main landing gear slammed into a truck full of dirt, destroying the truck and fatally injuring the driver. The truck had 10 tons of dirt in it, and the impact ripped the right landing gear off. Large pieces of the right landing gear was sent flying, and it impacted the right horizontal stabilizer, making the plane harder to control. The plane had lost a lot of its control surfaces. The flaps on the right wing was damaged, and so was the right elevator. But the plane was airborne, and the plane started to bank right. The aircraft was banking right so badly that the right flaps slammed into an excavator that was parked next to the runway. The cab of the excavator was all but destroyed. The plane continued on, but it was starting to bank right even more. The right wing dipped so low that it struck taxiway Alpha, scarring the pavement. The right wing at this point started to break apart. Investigators found a bit of the right wing embedded in taxiway Alpha. Up until this point, the plane had been more or less airborne. They had flown the plane for about 2,500 meters or 8,200 feet, but then their luck ran out again. The right wing hit a hangar which sent the plane crashing into the building itself. Of the 89 people on board, 73 did not make it. Flight 2605 had landed on runway 23 left instead of 23 right, with disastrous results. Listening to the ATC recordings and the CVR, they heard the controller clear the plane onto runway 23 right on 2 separate occasions. On the second instance, the controller brought up the fact that they were to the left of the runway and not on the extended center line. To understand what went wrong, we have to look at how the crew made their approach. The crew were carrying out what's known as a sidestep approach. They were to make their initial approach using the ILS of runway 23 left, and when they sighted the runways, they'd have to manually reorient the plane to line up with runway 23 right. That's how the airport was operating that day. 20 minutes before the accident, a Mexicana Boeing 727 had landed on runway 23 right using the exact same method with no issues whatsoever. But the sidestep approach hinged on one very important action, reorienting the plane when the runway was in sight. Up until that point, the plane would be following the ILS of runway 23 left. But even when they were at the decision height, the pilots did not have a visual on the runway. As per standard operating procedures, the pilots at this point had to go around and climb to 8,500 feet, but this crew did not. They kept descending. The crew only realized their mistake when they were seconds away from touching down. That's when the captain said, "No, this is the approach to the expletive left." Now, how could the crew make such a crucial mistake? It's time for a few disclosures. Up until now, I've been using the Aircraft Accident Digest number 26 as my source. It contains excerpts of the official accident report. I couldn't find the actual report anywhere, but I did find a December 1983 issue of the Flying magazine, which had a write-up about the crash. It had some interesting information. The magazine was founded in 1927, and it seems reputable enough, and since the official documentation is so short, I'm adding that information here. Just so you know, it adds some contemporary context to the incident. The article that I'm referencing kind of partially blames the airport. Meanwhile, the report that I'm referencing blames the pilot, and I bet that the truth is somewhere in between. Now, back to that question of the crew making the seemingly simple mistake. According to the Flying magazine, runway 23 left had been closed for a while and a NOTAM had been issued notifying pilots of the same. But the runway resurfacing work on runway 23 left had not started, and crew members of flight 23 left had landed on runway 23 left while the NOTAM was in effect. Sure, they had the NOTAMs in their briefing, but with them having landed on runway 23 left, it is unknown how seriously they took the NOTAM. Before the plane even got in touch with Mexico City International, they were being cleared for their approach to the runway. The co-pilot had asked for confirmation of the active runway, to which the reply was runway 23. The first mention of the active runway being 23 right was when the approach controller cleared them for the TEP-Xpan 23 right approach, but officially there's no approach by the name of TEP-Xpan 23 right. The co-pilot double-checked. And was that a TEP-Xpan arrival for 2605? The controller replied with, yes. No one clarified if it was runway 23 left or 23 right. As the plane got closer to the airport, the controller cleared them in saying, 23 right approach, report over Mike Echo, wind calm. As they got this transmission, the ILS on the DC-10 failed for a few seconds, and then it came back to life. The crew at this time was busy with the pre-landing checklist. The tower then told them that they were a bit to the left. It is possible that the crew could have misunderstood this to mean, hey 2605, you're a bit left to the 23 left localizer. But what they actually meant was that they were well left of the approach to 23 right. At 5:40 a.m. the controller says, okay sir, okay, the approach lights are on runway 23 left, but that runway is closed for traffic. At this time the crew talked among themselves, and the captain says, we're cleared on the right, is that correct? The co-pilot replied with, yeah, the right. The crew tentatively talk about a go-around, but they do not go around. The Mexican report says that the crew misjudged the amount of time that they had for a go-around. Seconds before touchdown, they were discussing a potential go-around. They also focused on the fatigue aspects of the crash. The captain had only about 5 hours of sleep the night before. The Mexican report also brought attention to the fact that the first officer had not been calling out their altitude during their descent. In the end, the report said that the accident was due to the non-compliance of the approach procedure, and the crew in this case was a mile behind their airplane. Their mental picture of where the plane was not accurate at all. They thought that they had time to go around, when in fact, they did not. Thank you for watching this episode of Mini Air Crash Investigation. A big thank you to Elliot L. CBG Spotter and Ryan Bomar for letting me use their amazing footage on my video. If you like the videos that I make, do consider liking and subscribing. It will really help the channel grow. I'll catch you guys next time. Stay safe.